You're listening to the BHSN Student Media Network. The following podcast was made possible by a grant from the Foundation of Monroe County Community Schools. The podcast is produced by students under the supervision of a staff advisor. Every effort is made to ensure the podcasts are holistic, objective, and accurate. Please understand this is a student learning environment and the work may reflect that. Enjoy the podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Talking Up North. I am Kelton O'Connell, and we are joined today by the Monroe County Education Association President, Miss Jenny Noble-Kuchera. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for being here. I guess to get things started, I'd love to learn a little bit about what the Monroe County Education Association does, the MCEA, and what your role in that is.
Thanks again for having me. The MCEA is what's commonly referred to as a local education association. And all that translates into is that we are a teachers' union. Sometimes it's even referred to as an LEA because, of course, we also are under the umbrella of ISTA, which is the Indiana State Teachers Association, which is also part of the NEA, the National Education Association. Coincidentally, it is the largest labor union in the United States.
Is that for just public education, or does that cover private and charter schools as well?
It is for public educators across the nation.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And what is that? How does that play out in Monroe County and at MCCSC?
That is the question of the hour. And how much time have we got, Kelton? So we have what I like to refer to as sort of a tree that has lots of different branches. One of those branches is that at the local level, we work very collaboratively through what is referred to as our discussion policy, which is quite literally how we bring teacher voice to discussion with administrators at both the building levels as well as at what we call the corporate level, right? So all of Dr. Winston's executive team. At the building level, it looks a little bit different because we are a tiny democracy. And as such, at the building level, we have association representatives. And those are teachers who are elected by the union members at their building to represent them. Once a month, they meet with the teacher union members in their building, and they essentially say, okay, what are some concerns that you have? Are there any, say, tweaks to the schedule? Are there any curricular decisions about materials or methods of teaching that we want to look at in our building? And the teachers all come together. They have a conversation about things that are going well, maybe suggestions they have for administrators, things that aren't going well. And then the association representatives take those topics under our discussion bylaw to their building level administrators, and they work it all out. The question that you might have as a follow-up, and I'll just try to anticipate it, is, well, what happens if you come to an impasse? And the answer is everybody simply does their best to proceed with good intentions. And it might be that there's a financial reason why a curricular adoption may not happen, right? But I would say we have a really high batting percentage across the district of this being a very professional and very collaborative approach to problem solving within the buildings.
Gotcha. And then taking a step back as union president, what's your role in coordinating all of this?
Oh, yeah. So my role is, well, I'll get to the other pathways too. My role is also branching out. So once a month, I meet with my MCEA board members. And board members are a collection, again, of elected officials. So I'm the president. We have two vice presidents. We have a secretary and a treasurer. We also have board members that represent primary, intermediate, elementary, both of those, as well as middle school and high school. And all of our representatives are proportional to the number of members. So when we were talking about the association reps at each building, if there are 10 members, or you can round up to 10, so if you have a school that has, say, 37 union members, you would then have 4 association representatives to represent them. And then the same thing happens at the board level. And we essentially divide ourselves out into committees. So right now we have a committee of folks who are working on what we call corporate discussion. So they meet with me as well as with our local administrators at the corporate level to look at district-wide issues, again, that dovetail and fall under our discussion bylaw policy. We also have another committee that meets every month with our what we call our case managers team. So that includes special education, that includes speech language pathologists, E&L, and those departments, so that if there's a specific concern that is district-wide, we can work that out with those particular administrators. We met last night with our information services team, and it's a collection, again, of union members, including me, who meet with our information services and technology department, and we look at, okay, what are some needs in terms of technology at the middle schools? Maybe they need an iPad upgrade. Maybe there is a situation where guest teachers need to be able to get onto Wi-Fi. How are we going to best facilitate that in a very kind of pragmatic day-to-day way? So really my biggest role, the thing that I do 24 hours a day, is I try to gather input from all 552 union member teachers and essentially say, okay, how can I take your voice, your concerns, your needs, and amplify them quite literally at the district level to make things better for our kids, right?
You keep bringing up a discussion policy or discussion bylaw. Can you tell us what that is?
Sure. Back in, 13-ish years ago, our state legislature and governor at the time in Indiana decided to separate working conditions from what we now think of as collective bargaining. So we have, when we talk about collective bargaining for a contract, that includes wages, salaries, benefits, and fringe-related benefits. Okay, we can talk about that more if you want to. The other part of what we need as employees is what we would refer to as working conditions. So a discussion bylaw essentially is the list of items that concern teacher working conditions, which are also student learning conditions, that we can talk about with our administrators to try to work on problem solving. So that includes things, as I mentioned before, like scheduling, adoption of curricular materials, hours worked, you name it. Safety concerns, things like that. Yeah.
So would it be a fair simplification to say that essentially the state decided to take away some parts of what teachers were able to do through the union with administrators, and that discussion bylaw kind of reinstated that, so to speak?
That is exactly what happened.
Okay.
Collective bargaining used to include working conditions. The state took it out. And so in order to navigate being able to have those conversations and do what's best for kids, yes, it was reinstated, and it is now an MCCSC board policy.
Is that common, do you know, in school districts?
We are the only ones in Indiana that have that.
Gotcha. What inspired you to fill this position?
The part of teaching that I loved the most in my elementary teaching career was working with families to make sure that kids had what they needed. I should have prefaced this whole thing by saying I'm also a teacher in MCCSC. I've taught English language learners now for over 21 years. So when my own children became college age and now older, I thought, okay, what is a way that I can help our larger community? Because I love the work that I do with my students and their families, but I wanted to sort of extend that. And you might have noticed that after the pandemic, there is what is in the news every day as a teacher shortage. And I thought, okay, what's a way that I can use my experience, my knowledge, to both recruit and retain teachers so that their lives are better, because that's going to help everyone in our larger school community.
Pursuant to that, what has been your most rewarding experience so far in your current position?
Oh, it's definitely when, as I said, teacher voice comes to, not to sound like I'm some sort of, puppeteer, but when I hear people and they have needs and they issue forth ideas that I know are going to work, and then I'm able to go, down to the administration building, and I sit in lots of meetings, and then suddenly a couple months go by and I realized that those meetings were so fruitful, because what has come out of the meetings is change that is going to be positive, and I'm happy to give you lots of examples, but change that's going to be positive for what's happening literally every day in our schools. Would you like an example?
Yeah, do you have one or two?
I do. So we have a lot of teachers, particularly at the elementary level, although some in middle and high school, who are traveling teachers. And it's because they might have a specialty that allows them to work with, a particular group of students. It might just be that, we might have a smaller school that doesn't need a full-time librarian. So we might have a library media specialist who travels, one school in the morning, the other school in the afternoon. And through no fault of anyone's, we never had an actual policy that said, how is it that traveling teachers are supposed to get from one place to another in the sense of their time? And, we had a lot of conversations, and it sounds like the tiniest thing, but it's huge, because now we have a policy that says when a teacher finishes teaching at one school, they get 10 minutes to walk from their classroom out to their car. Then, whatever Waze or Maps says, they drive to the next school, and they get an additional 10 minutes to get from their car into their classroom before they're expected to start teaching again. And you might think, well, how does this impact students? Well, you don't want a teacher who is so, harried and thinking about getting to the next building that they're not giving their students their full attention at one school. You also don't want, in terms of a safety issue, the potential for a teacher to be going too fast down the road to get to their second school. And so just allowing a policy to be worked out between teachers, between the union and administrators, to say they get 10 minutes on each end is just a very human approach that really is going to benefit any kid who has a traveling teacher. So again, it sounds like a tiny thing, like it's 10 minutes, but those 10 minutes mean a lot to our students.
Yeah,
right?
That sounds great. Do you have another example, maybe more high school centered?
Sure. I guess I would say for high school, a lot of the work that we've done lately has more to do with curricular adoption. So just really having conversations with administrators about new high school diploma requirements that are coming from the state. And what is that really going to look like? Because our current 8th graders are going to be the first cohort to be taking those pathways, and just making sure that we start those conversations early enough that every student, by the time they actually get to high school and have to meet one of those diploma requirements, is going to have the courses that they need, the teachers who are licensed to teach them, the curricular materials that are going to be in place. So that hasn't come to fruition yet, right? Because that's a sort of longer term goal. But just beginning to have those conversations is critical now for planning for the future.
In your role as kind of a liaison between teachers and administration, how do you balance maybe interest between what the district and administrators might have in mind and what teachers want?
I think that 99% of all teachers and 99% of all administrators are going to agree that we need to stay student focused. So we do disagree. We might have very different ideas about what that looks like, what that means, but it's my job to represent the teachers. I do that also at school board meetings as necessary. And so I think that everyone comes to the table, even if there is a disagreement, with the understanding that we're doing what we think is right for kids. So it is a tricky balance. And I can't pretend that there are times where I get a little frustrated because I want things to move faster. I want things to change overnight, but that's unrealistic. And the reason I feel that way is because I am still teaching. I'm here at Bloomington North happily every morning. And so when you're in the trenches, right, when you're doing the work every day, I have a real desire to want to affect change positively overnight. And one of the roles that a lot of the administrators have with me is to say, okay, we hear you and we will work on that with you. But it's going to take some time. So I think also part of that is just I'm new to the role. I took over at the end of May. So, I wanted to come out of the gate running.
How much has your expectation of the role differed from maybe your actual day-to-day?
Not too much. I was the vice president for the last couple of years ahead of taking on this role. So I was able to see most of what it entailed. Funnily enough, I actually think my transition to teaching high school has been more of a learning curve. Going from elementary to teaching high school than my president role in the teachers union. Yeah, because I was able to take the steps and sort of scaffold my own learning in that area. I served as an AR, I was on the MCEA board, and then I was the vice president. Yeah.
What does your day-to-day life look like wearing that union hat?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm here first thing in the morning. I teach M1, M2, G5, G6. See, I'm still learning the lingo. And then I leave. And so I joke that I teach in the mornings and then I union in the afternoons. That can be a lot of working on policy. I've got some sort of active documents right now that I'm trying to get either association reps or all members to give input on. So I work on proposals for administrators, policy work. I do a lot of writing. I also just answer a lot of questions. This is also public knowledge. This coming Friday, teachers will receive a little bit of a bump in their pay because it's state funding. It's called Teacher Appreciation Grants. But how do we know how much we're going to get and when? And so navigating that and making sure that everyone has a lot of information. So I'm a sort of, I'm a pensieve, as it were, for a lot of teachers to dip into because they might have questions about our bargaining agreement, they might have questions about their pay, or they might just have ideas that they want to share. So I'm going to say between text messages and emails and just talking to people one-on-one, just real conversations, I'm probably in touch with about 30 to 40 different people every day in the afternoons and evenings. Yeah.
What do you think are some of the biggest challenges teachers face in our district?
I think that we have a little ways yet to go when it comes to balancing what I call consistent practices across the district with allowance for specific coursework and specific buildings to function in their own kind of independent way. And I guess what I mean by that is it would be fantastic, and yet it wouldn't if we were all the same, right? Like there's no way that Bloomington North is ever going to be the same as Bloomington South. But I would say that a lot of teachers see what happens at other schools, and in the best possible way, it's my job to take what's happening at all the schools and try to streamline it so that everybody is having a positive experience with their students and in their classrooms. So I would say the biggest challenge that teachers right now in the district face is, ironically, the same thing that we all love, which is how we're operating independently from one another, but also the need for consistency in how we are all governed and in what the expectations are. And I think, if I may say this, I know you've interviewed Dr. Winston. I really feel that Dr. Winston and her team also see the need to strike that balance, to say, okay, we don't want cookie cutter schools. Not everyone is going to be the same. But the fact is we need to strike a little bit of a better balance between how we're handling situations at one school compared to another. I would say that's at the district level. At the state and federal level, we are extremely anxious as educators to see what 2025 is going to hold. We have elected officials whose intent is to dismantle public education as we see it now. So my district level concerns are tiny droplets compared to the ocean that is the potential future of public education.
I want to get to that in a second.
Oh, sure thing.
Can you tell us maybe more about that consistency between schools, how that might manifest in the classroom?
Sure. Let's look at class sizes. So we might have one school where, because of its catchment zone, right, because of where students are living, we might have class sizes upwards of 29, 30, 31 kids. Teachers can manage that, but that's harder than a small classroom of 12 to 15. So you don't want to punish the students who need a smaller class area or class size, but you also want to make sure that we work towards a better balance.
Gotcha. Let's go back to the state and federal legislation and looking towards that. What is your role in assisting the district in navigating that?
So my role is to, and this is where we get back to ISTA, which is the Indiana State Teachers Association. My role is to work really closely with our organizers and our UNISERV directors, who are all out of Indianapolis but work across the state, to make sure that we do our best after hours, because during the school day we are teaching, but after hours to do as much advocacy work as we can to educate our larger community, frankly, to make sure that our newer teachers as well understand what the repercussions might be for legislation that's coming. Something that several legislators have already openly indicated is that they would like to take away teacher union collective bargaining rights in the spring legislative session. So we are already gearing up to work quite literally as one, as a union, to block that legislation and also make sure that those rights are protected. I would say another legislative piece that keeps circling around is persecuting transgender youth. Indiana legislature tends to like to copycat what is happening in other states and try to push that through here. But they are all our children. They are all our students. And so we also work with entities beyond just the teachers' unions to make sure that our community and statewide partners also feel supported.
How do you navigate that? How does MCCSC navigate that? Taking a stance on legislation and not maybe interchanging that with a political affiliation?
We do it very carefully. So the Indiana State Teachers Association can, through a democratic process, support candidates that they consider to be pro-public education candidates, people who have quite literally made statements saying, I will make sure that taxpayer dollars continue to go towards public education, because 92% of all students in Indiana attend a public school. That's important. We are, however, nonpartisan. So when it comes to politics, we look at legislation and we look at candidates and officials who are working in our students' best interests.
What is the impact that the MCEA has for our students across the district?
I think that is there are multiple ways in which our students are impacted. First of all, Bloomington is kind of a small town. I know we have a big gown with Indiana University, but the fact is that we're at just over 10,000 students in our population here in MCCSC. So it's really hard to extricate how the teachers union is any different from any other entity in our community. I mean, I think about like NAACP, United Way, Boys and Girls Clubs, Parks and Rec. We're all here, and our whole purpose is to make sure that our future citizens are happy, productive, well-educated students. So the way the teachers union does that specifically is quite literally by making sure that when we do have a voice and we do come to the table, that we are enacting policy and advocating for changes that quite literally are going to positively affect all the students in our district. I think, in the classroom, I would never say that, a teacher who's not a union member is doing any better or worse of a job than a teacher who isn't. But I think when you are a teacher union member, you know that you're part of a much bigger collective voice, and that has power behind it. And I think that if we do, with great power comes great responsibility. So I think along those lines, when we do advocate for change, we always are keeping what's going to be best for kids in mind.
And why teachers? Why do we care about what teachers think if we're focusing on what's in the best interest of students?
Because we are all bubbling in this jacuzzi together, my friend. We are. We spend, hopefully, 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours with our families, and 8 hours at school. So what happens with teachers' emotional health, with their physical health, with their own professional development, with their general well-being is going to every day directly impact the students in their classrooms.
Where do you see the future looking for MCCSC?
For MCCSC or for MCEA?
Let's start with MCEA.
Okay. I want everyone to be a member. And I know that sounds like a very sort of pat thing to say, but it's true because, and here's a great example. So we passed the referendum in 2022, right? But then we also passed the preschool pre-K referendum the next fall. And up until that point, we didn't have any teacher members who were pre-K or preschool teachers because they were in a sort of separate category, right? But now that we have universal pre-K, I thought, oh my gosh, we have got to make sure that preschool teachers join the teachers union. Because as soon as they do, guess what? They can come to their association reps in their buildings. They can come to me. And we have Dr. Tim Dowling, who's our early learning coordinator. He's phenomenal. But he is in charge of a big swimming pool. And to have pre-K and preschool teachers who are new, right, as of this August, join the teachers union means that we can all learn from them what the celebrations are, but also what the challenges are in those classrooms with our youngest learners. And it's made me really happy to see that a lot of them have joined the teachers union. And so I've been able to bring their concerns and their ideas. You want to hear one? This is great. Okay. So it turns out, and this is not a bad thing, that their accreditation system, it's called NACI, N-A-C-I, dictates that if a student is asleep, you let them take a nap, right? These are little people. And so nobody thought about the fact that if a student is napping, but it's their time to go to like music class or go to art class, right? Or go to PE and play with scarves and balls, that we can't wake them up. And so, again, this is like the traveling teacher thing. Like, it's this tiny thing, but imagine if we didn't have a teachers union and there was no voice from the pre-K teachers to say, hey, do you think we can change the schedule so that our youngest students can have their specials classes earlier in the day so that everybody gets to participate in those classes that are so important for their, brain development.
Even
right?
if they're asleep.
Well, no, the idea is they take a nap after lunch.
Yeah.
So if they can go to specials before lunch, then they take a nap after lunch, and it means every 4-year-old gets to go to art class, right? So that's sort of like my connecting the dots. Like, we start a new program. I recruit teachers to join the union. Their voice is heard. And later we affect change that directly, positively impacts kids, right? So what was the question?
No, you answered it. And
Okay.
then where do you see the future of the district from your lens and your chair?
That's $1 million question too. So I don't know if you've heard, school board is looking at and hired a consultant for district-wide redistricting. So I hope and I plan to make sure that the teachers union really does canvass, survey, get feedback, get input from all the teacher members across the district on what that's going to look like. Again, what do they think is going to work for them, and subsequently what's going to work for kids. Not everybody's ideas are going to, be feasible, right? And we do need to defer to research, to consultants. Ultimately, the decision is up to the school board. But making sure that we have a place at the table, which I know we will, in that decision making. So do we need to redistrict? Oh, yes, we do. Do we know what that's going to look like yet? No, but I already have a lot of teachers telling me their ideas, and that's fantastic.
You have anything else you wanted to add or say?
I guess I would say that because this is going out to students. Yeah. I guess I would want students to know that a teacher's day, and I think a lot of kids do, but, you know, if I could wave a magic wand and say, okay, what do I want every 16-year-old to know who's a student at MCCSC, or even every 6-year-old, I would say I want them to know that their teachers love them and they care about them. And when they join the teachers union, they're doing sort of extra more other work towards that end because we are stronger together.
Thanks for joining us today, and thank you for your super impactful role in our schools in our district.
Kelton, it was a pleasure as always.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the podcast. We welcome feedback about the podcast, but remember, this podcast was student produced, and as students, they are still learning. So please be kind when sharing feedback. If you have questions or comments about the podcast, please contact bhsnmedia@gmail.com.